Hi, everybody. I'm Skylar from Form Assembly here at the virtual Form Assembly office, which ironically has really nice desks, it looks like. If you signed up for Take Charge, how to create the best payments and donation forms for your org, then you're in the right place. That's what we're doing today. I always think about it this way. Form Assembly's been around almost 20 years at this point, and there's quite the following for this exact topic. This is a very hot topic, believe it or not, amongst our users over the years. If you're trying to run forms or set up forms that do charges and payments and donations, maybe you know firsthand that there could be a lot of potential manual work involved in cleaning up after that, or a lot of call volume for your company with this topic. So during my time here, I've seen this topic really transform teams, like take away some of that manual work or really transform the way the call volume at their company. So I'm excited to set this up. We've got a lot of great info for you today. Before I get to that though, a little bit of housekeeping. Maybe this is one of the first times you've gone through a Form Assembly webinar with us, but we're in the On24 webinar setup here. And with that, you'll see kind of a toolbar and various windows around that you can use to kind of have the best viewing experience for you. Resize things as you see fit. As we're talking, you might want to zoom in on something on a slide, or hopefully not focus too closely on me. Stay to the content. But that Q&A section you see there, that's a big one. We've got myself and other Form Assembly people standing by to handle sort of the volume of questions and answers. We want to gather as many questions and comments as we can throughout the webinar. We'll have some time at the end to get to as many as we can, and we also have the capability to follow up afterwards if there's something related to your account or a more specific question that we can answer. So feel free to use that Q&A box to your heart's content. We love answering this stuff and getting in depth with customer questions for sure. We always do get asked though that will this be available after the webinar, and absolutely we'll be sending the recording out shortly after everything wraps this week. So if something sounds really interesting, or you want to revisit a certain step in the demonstrations that you see today, rest assured that you'll get that recording and be able to follow along in that as well as taking notes today. So I mentioned some of the transformative ways that this topic can change how donations and payments are handled. But we've got an expert on hand to show you exactly how that's done. Joelle, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Skylar. Hello, everyone. My name is Joelle Swanson, and I'm the product trainer here at Form Assembly. I've been here for about 4 years, and this is honestly one of my favorite parts of the job is actually getting to talk to our customers, help them learn something more about Form Assembly, and just make their lives easier with learning how to do the different aspects of the forms. So let's get started with into what we're going to talk about today. So today we're going to be talking about transforming your payment collection, unlocking those smarter, more adaptable experiences. I'll show you how to handle multiple transaction amounts, one-time or recurring payments, and even no payment options, all within a powerful form. So to cover all of that, we'll start by demystifying dynamic payments, understanding what they truly are and why they're a game changer. Then I'll walk you through crafting forms, those payment forms, with calculations and formulas. After that, we'll explore workflows by rebuilding that payment process that we just saw entirely within a workflow to show you an alternative way that you can handle conditional payments. And finally, we'll put it all together and show how these can work for you. So what exactly am I? Before actually, sorry, I've got just a quick poll.
Pop quiz for you too. Yeah.
I know. I was just so excited to get started. But I just want to know, first off, before I get started, what's your biggest challenge with payment forms today? Is it just that they have too much data entry, all of that? Go ahead and click into your poll answer there, and just let me know.
Yeah, you heard me, at the top talk about some of the transformative ways these kinds of forms and these kinds of workflows have helped companies. Yeah, these are some of the top troubles, or hardships people have had getting this stuff set up, from what I've seen talking to customers. So curious to see if, people have already wrapped their head around this and are experiencing it, or if you're sort of realizing, talking to us up at the top that, yeah, these might be some problems in front of you if you're trying to set up some of these really nice payment donation setups. But let's see what people are saying.
Yes. Yeah. Let's see. What all are people having? Oh, a pretty even mix of just all the issues. So yeah, I am loving this. We'll be covering a lot of these things today to basically make your lives easier, make those payment forms more automated so that you're not having to take in as much manual work when you're processing those responses, handling all of those different payment options and everything. And I see also some people put other. I definitely want to see what your others are. So please do share in the chat. So with that in mind, let's start discussing what are dynamic payment forms. So forget all of those static kind of one size fits all fields. With dynamic payment forms, they're interactive powerhouses. They're forms that intuitively respond to user input in real time, instantly adapting to calculate and process payments based on what your users select. Think of it like a smart cashier who knows exactly what to charge you based on your shopping cart, discounts, and even loyalty status, all without having to ask you. So this means you can easily handle one-time payments for simple transactions to configure robust recurring payments for subscriptions and memberships, ensuring consistent revenue streams with minimal manual effort. You can effortlessly offer multiple pricing tiers for memberships, even tickets or event tickets or services, allowing you to cater to diverse customer needs and maximize your conversions. And you can seamlessly integrate optional add-ons or dynamic discounts that instantly adjust the total, providing full transparency to your respondents and even boosting your average order value. The true value lies in the calculations and formulas you build directly into your form and payment connectors. These are fundamental in powering real-time calculations and enabling that conditional payment routing to guide your respondents to the perfect payment experience, so that with them, they can see everything, that it's fully transparent. They can see what they're being charged, how they're going to be charged, and ensuring that they are being charged the correct amount. So now that we've grasped the power of dynamic payment forms, let's see what makes them so adaptive and explore a couple intelligent real-world use cases where they shine. And let's think about it. With these conditional or dynamic payment forms, kind of either or, conditional or dynamic, both of them fit these payment forms we're talking about today. You can use event registrations where you're seamlessly handling early bird or VIP pricing that adjusts automatically on the form based on the rules you set. You can have a donation form that you empower your donors with flexible recurring options and custom amounts, boosting that generosity with ease. You can use order forms where they dynamically bundle products and offering relevant upsales or discounts or other products based on the customer selections. And then finally, we have subscription signups, effortlessly managing complex tier-based billing and recurring revenue, simplifying the entire subscription process. These are just a few quick glimpses of the incredible flexibility and efficiency you can achieve when your payment forms truly adapt to your needs and your users' choices. With these use cases in mind, and as we go through the demos, I want you to start thinking about your organization and what you can do with dynamic payment forms. Okay, so let's get into the demo. So for today's demo, I'm going to go through building an adaptive event registration form with an optional donation. This form will seamlessly handle different registration tiers and even give attendees the option to contribute a little extra, all calculating in real time. This isn't just about collecting information, it's creating a smart, intuitive payment experience. So give me just a second to share my screen. There we go. Okay, so here in my screen, we've got this form here. So I've already got it semi built out just so that we can get kind of to the more interesting bit. So here in this form, I've got the contact details already set up. Here is this free general admission that my respondents can select. Then also we have a table reservation where they can pay to have a table at the event, and this optional donation section where they can donate to the event. So here in my form, I do also want to ensure that my respondents know automatically as they're filling out the form how much they are going to be charged. And to do this, we're going to use calculated fields. So in this form, we've got the payments for the table reservation, the amounts for the donations, and a grand total field. So let's start up here at the table reservation. We're just going to select that field, and we're going to make it a variable field, sorry, just closing some of those out so that we can get to the more thing. So we'll just make this a quick variable field. And we've got the amounts in right there. So we can save that. Then we can go down and do the same for the donation amount here as well. I'll make this a variable titled one time. There's the amounts in there. And then this is where it gets a little bit special. So we have that other amount for the donation. So for this variable, I put it in as 0 because I'm going to come into the amount you'd like to donate and make this a variable as well. I'm just going to title this other. Then this way, they can automatically have those variables. And those variables are going to come here to that grand total due today field. And this one, rather than a variable, we're going to make that a calculated field. And all I'm going to do here is going to be table plus one time plus other. And all that's going to do is just automatically calculate the amount as my respondents enter in. So if I save the form, then we can go view the calculation here. And we can see, okay, the grand total field's not appearing like it should. It should not appear just yet. But as soon as I click the table reservation, it appears. And I can click through all the different experiences there. And then same for the donation. So one time and enter in the custom donations. However much I want, it automatically calculates. My respondents have that instant experience so that they're not having to do any mental math to be like, how much am I going to be charged for this? Now, with this, coming back here to the form, this is all well and good, but this isn't going to be where we actually process the payment. We'll need to go over to our payment connector to actually go through that process. So when we come here, today, I'm going to be using the Stripe connector, but you can use whatever connector you have or payment connector that you use with your business and organization. I do want to note, though, that the exact setup I'm going to be using today will only work with our Authorize.net, Stripe, and IATS connectors, as they're the only payment connectors that can process one-time and recurring payments within a single connector. If we're using one of the other payment connectors, don't worry, you can add multiple payment connectors just with some of the formulas like I'm going to show you today. So we'll go ahead and go into our Stripe connector. So I've already got some of the basic stuff here filled out so that we can get into the subscription and one-time charges. Now, here is where we're going to need to add a lot of formulas, but don't worry, I'll walk you through each of them. So we'll start out with the subscription. And with the subscription, with the plan ID, for Stripe, you have to enter in the plan ID so that it will subscribe them / have that recurring payment. So we're going to do the defined in the form, and that's going to be the, let's find it, the recurring donation selection field from that form. So we can select that, and then the show choice mapping. Here, all you need to do is just enter in the plan IDs for each of the ones that you've created in Stripe for your specific subscription. So let me just copy those from my Stripe and put them in real fast. Copy, paste. And then the last one, the 300 for a year subscription. Paste. Okay, perfect. So that's all I need to do for the plan ID mapping. Then the next step, to make sure it does only charge whenever recurring is selected, I need to change this plan quantity. I don't want it to be defaulted 1 because that means every time this form goes through and gets submitted, they will be charged a recurring fee, a recurring donation or recurring payment. So we're going to do defined here, and we're going to do a formula. So I'm just going to go ahead and click this blue F and open the form field editor here. So with this, I'm going to use an @if formula that is going to look at my donation field. And I'm going to select I would like to make a recurring donation. And I can use that field because the amounts that I mapped here are all going to be required after the selection is made. So I don't have to worry about there being an issue. But with this, if that is selected, then yes, I want the subscription to run. So I'll put in a 1. If it is not selected, then I don't want it to run, so I'll put in a 0. And with that formula, now I have it set up so that it will only run whenever a recurring donation is selected with the specific amount that they've selected in the form. So that is done. Now, we have a lot of those one-time charges for the table and one-time donations. How exactly are we going to set all of those up? So we're actually going to need to set up 3 additional one-time charges for each of those different conditions here. So we'll add a item for sale. These ones you can do as you need to. I'm not going to use them right now because they're not needed, but for the item name, I personally do want to use this so that I can make it easier for myself when I reference this back later, or if I need to review a response. Having this item name in here just makes it easy. So we're going to start off with table only. Then for the unit price for the table only, I've made it easy in my form with having those selections with the prices. So we'll just go into the form, find the select table type field that has the types of tables and the price next to them. And we'll just enter in the cost for each of those 3 tables, or 4 tables, sorry. And there we go. And then now, like we just did with the subscription, for the quantity ordered, we do have to make it so that it only charges whenever only the table has been selected. So we're going to define it here and open that formula editor. So again, we'll start with an @if formula, and we'll pull in, instead of the field that we used there, we're going to go to, I would also like to reserve a paid table for the event, and select yes. So that means when this is selected, we're going to go to the next part, which is going to be the recurring. So we don't want this to constantly run and just charge the table amount. So we're going to do @if and enter in. If the donation amount one time was selected, I do not want this to run. So I'm going to put in a 0 there. But if the table was selected and no donation was selected, or no recurring donation, then I do want this to run. So I'll enter in a second one, enter that in. And then finally, if the table is not selected, I don't want this to run, so I'll end out my formula. So this is going to be a complex formula with a formula within a formula. So we can just double check both of those things there. So I'll apply that. And that one is done. So we now have that. So if only the table is selected, it will always run. But the good thing about setting it up like this is if the recurring donation is selected and the table is selected, then both will be charged to the respondent, so they're able to have that kind of custom experience. Now, we just need to add for if there is a one-time donation only, since there is that free option, they don't have to make any payment to this, but they can still choose to donate. So we want to make sure that we are highlighting that opportunity if they have chosen to make a donation. So we're going to do one time only. And we'll do the unit price defined here. Or not defined here, defined in the form, because we do have that one time only defined in the form. So we'll scroll down on the donation amount. So select the donation amount. That's a one-time donation. Show the choice mapping. That's 25, 40, 50. And then I can use a alias here. So for this alias, I will just grab that other donation amount field from my form and paste it in. So then now automatically, if this is selected, it will pull in that amount from the field, from the form, I mean. So you're able to have that custom amount without having to go on and expand the mappings or anything. Then we have the quantity ordered. We're going to define it here. And I'm actually going to come up here and just copy and paste this formula because we need this exact formula just kind of in reverse. So we'll just copy that, paste it here. I'll bump it out so it's a little bit easier for you guys to see what I'm doing. So all I'm going to do is take this amount here, this 2263, move it here, and that 1885, and move it there. So then now what it is doing is saying, okay, if that one time is selected, great. Check and see if that table has been selected. If it has, then 0. If it hasn't been selected, then great. We're going to charge them a one-time donation only. But then finally ending with, if the one-time donation is not selected at all, then we're going to say 0 so that they're not going to get charged. We're going to go done. You can press done on that one. And then we need that final charge for if they have selected a table and if they have selected a one-time donation, we'll add an item for sale here for that. So we'll just enter in table and one time so that I've got that for my records. Then for the unit price, we're going to do define in the form. And remember that calculated grand total field? That's going to make it easy for this unit price here in the form, in the connector. Just got to find that field. There it is. And so now to automatically pull from that grand total field to be charged to this connector. Then for the quantity ordered, I'm going to do defined here again. And with this one, we're going to want it kind of similar to what we've just done above. So if you don't want to go through the steps of building, you can always go back and copy and paste your previous ones. And we're going to come back here with this formula, paste it in again. I'll bump it out so you guys can see a little bit easier. So with this one, the only thing I need to do is actually just switch this 1 and 0. And why I need to do this is because for this, I want it, if the one time is selected, check if table is selected. If yes, then I want this connector to run. So I'm going to put in a 0 for that true statement. But if the one time is selected, but the table is not, I don't want this particular charge to go through. So I'm going to put a 0. Then finally, if neither is chosen, that's going to be a 0. And we can apply that and hit save. And our connector is fully completed and our form is ready to go. So we can start charging our respondents immediately. If you would like to, rather than just having a thank you page, you can have a email sending out to those respondents with a receipt, a PDF, kind of all of those things here in the notifications to extend that respondent experience besides just the form. Now, let me stop sharing for a second, just because we are moving on to the workflow demo. And with the workflow demo, I'm gonna actually share my entire window just so that, I'm gonna do that real fast before I forget, because we're gonna have a couple pop-outs and I wanna make sure that you guys are seeing everything. So let me share that screen and get away from the Affinity. There we go. Okay, so with the workflow here, we're just gonna basically take that exact same process and just show an alternative way of doing this. Here in the workflow, if I can scroll in, you can see I brought over that form, just the form. I didn't bring over the Stripe connector because we're gonna do something a little different for the Stripe connector. So we're not gonna have to have all of those formulas we just built in the Stripe connector here. With workflow, you're able to add in a conditional pathway and be able to have all of those different payment connectors going down to each of these. So I've kind of started setting it up a little bit so we don't have to go through each one. But if I open up that conditional pathway, we can see I have that free registration path, which if I scroll in over here, when it goes down, the respondents are just directed to a page redirect, a document step, and then an email. Then for the table only, they have the Stripe connector and a page redirect. And for the other ones, we haven't finished setting them up, but we can go through and I can show you how I've set up this conditionals with these last two pathways. So for the table and recurring path. So for here, I'm going to select that form field and we're going to do the table that they would like to reserve a paid table. And since it's table and recurring, we're going to equal yes to I would like to reserve a table. We'll add a rule, and then we'll add in the field for I would like to make a equals recurring donation. So then now I can then add in the steps following that for basically if there's only a table and a recurring donation. Then the final pathway here is going to be the recurring only. So how I have mapped the other steps is going to take those same fields I just mapped, but do a little bit different operators with them. So that I would like to reserve a paid table. I'm going to change the operator to doesn't equal yes, meaning that if they have selected that they would like a table, they're going to get directed to one of my other pathways. Then we'll add a rule, and that's going to be that same I would like to make equals a recurring donation. And that is it. So for this, we are ready to go ahead and get started with kind of mapping the rest of those steps. So let's look quickly here at the Stripe connector, and then I'll go through and make a couple other connectors just to show how quick it can be when you are not having to worry about those formulas and things in the connector. So I'll configure the connector here. I'm not going to bother mapping that just yet, but here in this table only, I just have that one singular charge. I have it mapped to that same select the table you'd like to reserve field with the amounts and just put it as defined here. And that's all I need to do for that connector. So I'm able to save it, exit, and we can move on to the next connector, which is table and one time only. So we'll add in a new connector step here, select the event registration form, select the Stripe connector, configure the connector. I'll worry about mapping all of those required fields later, but we'll come down here to the one-time charges. So this is going to be the table and one time. So remember in our form connector step, we're going to enter in an item name so that we have an easier time referencing this later. And for the unit price, we can define that in the form and select grand total due today, the quantity ordered defined here as 1. And the reason that we're able to have the defined quantity as 1 for each of these connectors is because the workflow will only direct to this connector whenever the conditions in this conditional path are met. So I can ensure that the only times my respondents will encounter these is going to be when they should be encountering them. And I can just go down through each of these steps and map that progressively through my connectors and have each of those connectors set up. Now, another good thing with the workflow is I can take this a step further. I don't necessarily have to just end at the redirect path or the page redirect. I can add in document step, generate a custom receipt, or I can add in a custom email for each of these. I can do another form if I'm doing, like, say, recurring. After the Stripe connector runs to process that recurring payment, I can add in another form if I want to collect more information from those recurring donations. All of that, I can add in more steps to my process here in workflow. So it offers a powerful alternative approach to orchestrating those payment processes. So let me stop sharing. Sorry for the infinity screen here for a second. There we go. Okay. So before we wrap it up, I do have this final poll. I just kind of want to know which one you guys are most excited to try in your forms and workflows. Skylar, was there something that kind of sparked your imagination from the demos or anything?
I could definitely see how like recurring donations is probably helping with a lot of headaches for people, but really that real-time calculation, dynamic pricing. I mean, I know as a form filler outer myself on other setups, it just makes my life so much easier when you can calculate totals on the fly or add on that sort of additional donation or amount right there on the spot. It's now that I work at Form Assembly, it's kind of amazing to see some of that custom logic or the features that enable what seems to be a simple experience to just to make that so anyway, that's my favorite for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I honestly just like how flexible it is just to be able to set up the payment forms. That's probably like my favorite part of form assembly just in general is the pure flexibility of what you're able to do. So I really like how you can kind of transform those payment forms. Okay. Well, I think we've gotten probably a good amount. Let's see what people's opinions are. Oh, I've got another
Awesome.
semi-even mix. So that's great. I love to see all of that with everyone. And I hope that you can see the versatility of what I covered today. But let's kind of move on to kind of putting it all together. I know I covered a lot of information, moved a little fast. So let's kind of go over all of that I talked about today. So today we just talked about, sorry, I'm getting over a cold. Okay, sorry.
All good. You got it.
Here's a quick summary of just kind of everything. So we went over those adaptive forms. They are driven by smart calculations to capture precisely what you need. We've learned about how to implement dynamic pricing through those powerful formulas, ensuring real-time accuracy for everything from those tiered registrations to optional donations, and even guaranteeing those free registrations if you have that. I connected to seamless payments via the integrated payment connectors, handling both that free transactions, again, the one-time and recurring transactions efficiently. Then finally, we explored automated journeys, the workflows that we just saw at the end there, showing an alternative way to manage conditional payments and orchestrate those complex post-submission actions. So what exactly is the real takeaway here? Is I just want you to consider the ripple effect of these capabilities across your organization. How can transforming your payment processes free up valuable time, improve data accuracy, and elevate your user experience? It's about moving beyond some of those static manual forms to truly intelligent automated systems that work smarter and harder for you and your customers. So I hope this session has sparked new ideas for your forms and workflows. Now let's hear from you guys. What are you guys thinking? What's going on?
I'll also say before we get too far into the questions, there's a couple things here. If you're either new to form assembly, like you haven't jumped in yourself yet, or maybe you're on kind of a legacy a plan with us, well, you saw that at their end that sort of branching workflow logic. Yeah, that is our form assembly workflow experience, workflow feature. In your dashboard, if you're on our Teams plan or above, you'll see an area to click called workflows, and that's how that sort of branching logic and automation was set up in there. So I want to call it the resources section that you might see on the bottom right of the screen here. One has a great help article. You've maybe got a number of payment forms in mind. There's a help article there to help you decide like which payment connector should I use, and you'll see some sort of side-by-side comparisons with that. But also if you've been interested in that workflow feature or want to see like a more in-depth view, you got some options there in resources. So keep that in mind. I saw a few questions come in of like, hey, what was that feature? So if you haven't seen or used workflows before, that was a nice little sneak peek of that for you.
Perfect. And before we get into the questions, I do actually see a couple that they couldn't see the workflow Stripe connector. I do just want to share my screen. I shared my entire like screen, like everything on my computer, but apparently it didn't show for some people. So let me just go ahead and share my screen and just kind of
Yeah.
show you a little bit about what I was doing there. There we go. Okay, froze a little bit there. So here we are. So with that, basically what I was saying is you have that quantity order just defined as one, and you're able to just have that more simplified approach for each of the connectors that you have in workflow based off of those conditional paths. So that's essentially all that you're doing here in the Stripe connector, of just very directly, very quickly mapping each of these when you're going through the Stripe connectors. Okay, so hopefully that kind of answers some of the questions if you weren't able to see that screen share. I'm sorry if it didn't come through. My computer sometimes hates me.
Oh no.
But yeah, let's get questions.
Let's see. I'm not sure on this one. We had one towards the beginning saying, Danny's saying, we capture our payments through the Salesforce org. We're hoping to capture donations through Fontiva. Is there a seamless integration that can have that user fill out the form inside of a Salesforce screen flow? Have you heard of that kind of setup before?
I have a little bit. So with that one, we don't have a direct connector or integration with Fontiva, but if you have it set up in your Salesforce org, then what you could do is use a redirect link or the redirect step in workflow with the link to that Fontiva page in your Salesforce org. I'm sure that there's probably some like pre-fill through the URL or some other elements that you could do to transfer like the payment information, like not the payment information, but like the payment totals from the form through the redirect link into your Fontiva page. I'm not super familiar with Fontiva, so I'm not sure the exact steps, but you could just be like, I would assume, be like, oh, okay, here's the link, total equals X amount, and then pull that into your Fontiva page in your Salesforce org.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if you're on that same help article that's in our resources currently, you'll see a search bar at the top there. So, some of those terms we just mentioned, like form redirect or, page redirect, doing a direct search for some of that will probably take you to, some of the click by click and setup instructions for getting one of those if you want to try it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm trying to wade through here. Let's see. Yeah, I was wondering if you get this question a lot. Trish brings up the fact I'm worried about the security of, personal or payment information that's being collected when we set up, form logic like this, or, some of that workflow logic that's automating some of this through. Do you get that question often?
Yes, we do actually get that question often. Everyone's very concerned about their customers, respondents' personal information, and with Form Assembly, I can say it is extremely secure. We do not store the credit card information in any capacity except for those last 4 digits. Essentially, how the process works is we directly connect through a secure connection to our connectors, so like Stripe, Authorize.net, etc. All of those connectors, we connect directly to the API to process payments, and so we don't store the payment connector or payment information, so the credit card details, any of that. It gets sent directly to the payment integration where they handle the payments and everything. So your respondent's information is never going to be sitting anywhere where it could be compromised within Form Assembly. It's going to be sent directly to those integrations.
Yeah, and I'll add, having talked to a few customers about this, that this is actually a place that we really think a lot about and put a lot of work in. Over the years, you'll see if you dig sort of deeply into Form Assembly's integrations that, unlike some other setups, we're not using kind of like a third party to handle those, the API calls and stuff like that. Some places will say, we integrate with this. And really what's happening is they're sending information from your setup to that third party. That third party is then sending it again over to like a Stripe or a Salesforce or anything. But with Form Assembly, we've done a lot of work to keep things, compliant across a lot of different industries, these security settings, and as to, like you said, kind of not store things in an unsafe way. So we're happy to answer more security questions like that if you have them. Absolutely, if it's a non-starter for you or your industry to handle information in a certain way, get in contact with us. But we've for sure thought pretty long and hard about that over the years. A couple of these questions here might have had to do with like the conditional or like the kind of let me set up a subscription, but maybe also do sort of a one-time on top. Like I saw, who was it? Let's see. Deborah was saying like, can you put in a guest name, which would add maybe like a second ticket for an attendee name. There was also one about, what if I wanted to buy this item, but also add sort of like an additional kind of $5 donation. I think you were kind of, showing a setup like that, Joel. Is that maybe something to reiterate from earlier on in the demo?
Yeah, so definitely you can easily add more attendees' names. So like with the form, it was just a simple example form, but after that free admission ticket field that I had, you could have further conditional fields of like, okay, great, you can select up to 5 tickets. So I have 5 conditionals. And if they select 5, then all 5 of these secondary attendees need to have their information filled out here. So you can collect their information as well. You can also do, if you have an additional $5 or something, you can add that in both in the form or in the connector, just doing kind of like what we did today, where it's like, okay, great. They selected the, I want to have $5 added, or like, I would like to round up for my bill or something. If you're doing that type of donation, you can have that formula entered into your connector to just be like, okay, great. They selected this option. Let's charge them this amount. And you're able to really kind of customize how you're doing that.
Yeah, those are so great. If you get the recording of this afterwards, I would go back to that. We're using her plug in some of those kind of if statement and formulas on the form side, and maybe a little bit later in the workflow. But yeah, think about, you're checking out at the movie theater and you want that free child ticket, 2 adult tickets, maybe add, a donation at the end, or you're registering for an event. We want, 1 team, a couple individuals. Like we've been through those flows before. In our day-to-day life, you can absolutely do that with your own forms. So I would definitely revisit that part of the demo.
Yeah, and I also want to say too, like in the demo today, I did just map the total charged, that quantity, like not the quantity ordered, but like the amount charged field to just form fields. But you can also enter in formulas there. So if you're wanting to be like, okay, they checked a checkbox here, I can be like, great, their total was $20. They checked, I'm going to have a donate $5 checkbox. You can have a formula that would be like, okay, great, they checked this checkbox, add $5 to the total, or they didn't check this checkbox, just have the total. You can add that type of formula in as well to the connector if you would like to do that, versus having those calculations or form fields that we map to in today.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely goes back to what we're saying at the top, right? Like making teams' lives a lot easier with that stuff. We're, taking out some of those manual processes or manual follow-up you used to have to do, or a lot of unnecessary redirects to different pages and different parts of the forms. You can kind of do it all in one spot, which is great. This one was interesting to me. Can we restrict the mode of payment? So I only want to be able to accept credit card or only debit card.
So that one would depend a little bit more on the payment integration that you are doing specifically. Form Assembly doesn't have a way to kind of restrict that per se in the forms. You can put in, like, of course, the field title instead of credit card, debit card, and make like a hint of saying like, hey, debit cards are only accepted. I do know Stripe in the EU only allows debit cards. And so when you're in the EU using Stripe, if you try to enter in a credit card, it's going to throw an error, but that's more of an error coming from Stripe and showing on the form versus a error from Form Assembly, if that makes sense. So they'll still be forced to put in that debit card if that is how your integration is set up.
Yeah. Let's see. Um,
And then I do also want to see, I see a question from Sarah. She asked if we need help with if formulas, can we reach out to support to help us double check if we did it right? And definitely, if you have any questions or have any issues setting up your payment forms or any form in general, definitely reach out to our support team. They're always more than happy to kind of be like, okay, great. Yeah, this is why your formula may not be working, or great, everything looks good. They can definitely help you out there so that you're not kind of being like, ah. And then I also saw another question if there is an ability to help have someone walk you through. We do also have our implementation services, and you can buy a consulting hour or form building package or something, and they can help you build out your form even. So that's definitely some options if you're having any issues setting up your forms.
Yep. This is one of my favorites. Can you connect multiple forms to the workflow so that they're all involved in following some of the same processes?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on how you're wanting. So if you're saying, okay, great, I just want this like today. I had the one form with the conditional step and all the steps following it. What I would do if I wanted another form to follow those exact steps is I would actually clone the workflow and replace the form and the workflow. And that would still kind of keep all of that same stuff going. You'd have to do a couple extra mappings to remap to the new form, but you can easily do that so that you can have your forms kind of functioning and following the same process. If you add another form step, for example, depending on how you set it up, that would just be like a kind of next page in the form. If you add like a form step 1, form step 2 immediately following, if you didn't change like the assignments and things on form step 2 for your respondents, it would just be like, okay, form 1 is page 1, form 2 is page 2, even though they're entirely separate forms.
Yeah. So much flexibility in that workflow tool. But yeah, just like you said, you can save yourself a ton of time. Think back to when you saw that branching logic on the screen in the demo for the workflow. That top one was the form itself. So depending on what's happening in that form, let's automate, sort of what happens next or how things get processed. Yep, you might just clone that same logic, apply it to another form, sort of at the top right, so that no matter where they are, what form they're kind of going into, you're getting that automated logic. And there's a lot more flexibility on top of that. Absolutely check out some of the help documentation or just ask us straight up. It's, with workflows, it's almost if you can dream it, you can do it. There's a ton of flexibility in there. How about this? We looked at, recurring payments. That someone's wondering, can you then schedule a payment for a certain date? Like I might take the charge right now, but then tell someone it'll be processed at a different time.
Yes, definitely. Depending on those recurring payments, how you set those up in your integration. I know with Stripe, you can set it up so that, okay, great, it's the first of the month is when it charges, and that's the recurring payment date. But the respondent fills it out today, like June 26th. Then that recurring payment would be charged on July 1st. If it is one-time payments, the one-time payments, most of the integrations are going to immediately take that one-time payment. I'm sure that there's probably some flexibility that you're able to do with like the integration to be able to not have it due immediately, but that would require a complex setup on your integration side to be able to do kind of that custom date for one-time payments. Recurring, you just set it up in your integration and then the recurring charges it whenever it says.
Might be a good segue into this last question, which might sort of lead us out today. But someone points out we're heavy Salesforce users. We currently use Chargent for our payments, but we're interested in other options. So they're wondering, like we saw today, is Stripe the one that's required to use as a payment form in Form Assembly? And I think I know the answer here too.
Yes, yeah, this one, it is not the only payment. We actually do have a Chargent connector in Form Assembly. So you are able to use your Chargent account that you already have to set up payment forms in Form Assembly. So you would just have a Salesforce connector to connect to that Chargent gateway. Then you'd have a Chargent connector following that. That would be the only kind of specialized setup with the Chargent. But yeah, definitely. We have a variety of payment connectors. So as Skylar mentioned, check out that resource that goes over all of our payment connectors to see if you're using something already, if we have it. And if you are not using a payment integration yet, maybe you're looking for one. It might help you make that decision. So yeah.
Yep. Great transition, sort of in the last part here. Yeah, I want to one more shout out to sort of that resources section. The resource we have highlighted in that link right now, I think even just that one compares 6 or 7 of our top payment integrations. You'll get that sort of side by side, but that's also just a starting point if you want to dive deeper into the help documentation, learn something more specific about any one of those payment forms or just payment setups or workflows in general. But you know, we want to call out that, yeah, you saw a ton of stuff really fast today, right? And depending on what plan you're on or what features you have access to, you know, some of this might have been something that's on a Teams plan or higher, right? So the other links in our resources section are, if you're an existing Form Assembly customer, maybe you saw something that you're interested in getting kind of more information on or a demo on or an add-on for your account, that'll hook you up with an account manager for you. Happy to answer those questions. We're happy to maybe even set up implementation, additional onboarding and training with you. You use that link, you'll get a direct connection to us. If you're not using Form Assembly yet and you saw something that piques your interest, there's another link there for just requesting, you know, a general demo, right? Tell them you started here and you want some more information about a feature you saw today, and we'd be happy to get someone on the screen to help you out with those questions as well. So those links, very helpful, whether you want to dive deeper into something you heard today or maybe, you know, add on to something or get a demo. But that said, we can make it a little easier. And I think this final poll question here is, yeah, would you like to see one? If you give us a sure, if you raise your hand here for this poll question, that gives us a direct access to know, you know, who is interested in getting more info or possibly getting, you know, a demo and learning more about these features. And we'll be able to follow up pretty quickly right after this wraps today. Otherwise, Joe, I don't know if you have any final thoughts on this topic or any last bits of advice.
No, I think this one is always like, I feel like highlights the true flexibility of both our forms and workflows. And I love that about Form Assembly, of just being able to really dive down deep and do exactly what you need to and customize your forms, the exact pathways. However, if it's straight, wiggly woggly, you're able to do your forms exactly as you need them to be. So that's why, exactly. Just again, I love Form Assembly.
Likewise, and we hope you do too. Thank y'all so much. You know, we try to run these at least once a month and go, you know, dive deeper on some of our features and hidden gem functionality for some of these accounts. So hope you found this informative. Stay tuned for that recording that's heading towards your inbox. You can follow along with the demo again. Try some of this out in your own Form Assembly setup, maybe. Otherwise, you know, feel free to reach out anytime. Give us more questions. Otherwise, you'll see us on the next one. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye.